We're super excited today. We've got myself, I'm Carly Anderson, and we have Kelly McCullough here as well. She is a very knowledgeable and professional real estate agent. I do the lending side. Today, we're going to be breaking down investing in real estate for you and talking about what that looks like, right? All the things that you need to know, kind of like investing 101 in real estate.
Perfect. If we can go over just the quick agenda that we're going to be doing today, and then we'll get started. We're going to be talking about the general rules of real estate investing, and then we're going to talk about the rewards of real estate investing. Then we're going to talk about when to buy, what to buy, and some different strategies that you can use when you're investing.
Perfect. Yep, we will go over all of that. Do you want to go over the next slide or do you want me to cover that?
You start, and then I'll probably just chime in if I have comments.
Love it. Okay, we'll just keep moving along then. So kind of some general rules when you're investing in real estate. One of the biggest one is that you actually need to keep in mind that investing in real estate is not for short-term profit. This is a long-term game. It's almost like you're starting a business. Like you're putting money in, you're starting this business knowing that it's probably going to be a few years down the road before you really start to make money. But we're going to talk about some of the numbers here and how you can make sure you're cash flowing like right off the bat, or how to make sure that your investment makes sense for you. But a lot of people will get into real estate thinking that they're going to have a quick turnaround and they're either going to like flip the house or they'll like instantly start making lots of money off of it. And that's not the case. So some of the things to keep in mind, that's one of the big ones, is that it is a long-term game. So this is an investment, not just like a get quick or get rich quick kind of a scheme. There really is no bad time to buy. And there's probably some people who would say the opposite of that. But when you're investing in real estate and you understand that it's a long-term game, then it doesn't really matter what's going on in the real estate market. If we can make some of the other numbers make sense, which we'll cover in some of our next slides, as long as those numbers make sense, and there's really not a bad time. We're not focusing on trying to catch a house at like the perfect interest rate or the perfect purchase price. Like I said, you're in it for the long game. So you know that maybe you might lose a little bit up front, but you're always going to come out positive in the end. And so it's not playing the market, it's not playing numbers. We're not getting scared of purchase prices or rates, because time is always working against you. So the longer you wait, typically the worse kind of a situation that you get. There are some people, and you'll hear those stories of like the people that just luck out and they just will be like, it just worked out for me and I bought at the perfect time. I got a low interest rate. The purchase price was reasonable. We got renters in right away. Like there are stories of that. And for some people, it works out beautifully. But for a lot of us, we kind of have to just like get in when we can and play that long game. And sometimes we take a loss for a little bit. Other times it totally makes sense. We've got amazing renters. So we'll cover a lot of that as we talk about some of the pros and cons in investing in real estate. But some other general rules here is that you never
Actually,
want to.
can I make a comment really quick on that?
Please
So
do.
to piggyback on what you were saying with the get rich quick schemes, there's a lot of people out there who are advertising programs or things that you can do to get rich really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably one of the best pieces of advice that you can keep in mind is that you should always be aware of pyramid schemes. If anyone's ever saying you can do this and then get all these other people to do that and then getting rich quick, like Carly said, I think what she was saying was dead on, because I went and saw a presentation from Cody Reeder the other day, who is longtime real estate investor. And he was saying the same thing that Carly mentioned about how there never is a bad time to buy. Even if you buy something and in the moment it seems like it wasn't a good deal and you lost some money, he said time is the equalizer of all things. And so if you just hang in there, your investment in real estate is going to pay off in the end. And so yeah, I think that when you're investing in real estate, you avoid the schemes, and don't go after the things that say that you'll get rich in a quick amount of time. This is a long-term investment and it's going to pay off, and you just have to have the patience for it.
Yes, exactly that. I was going to add to that. So when you're buying in real estate, you really should never sell to make money off the property. So like, don't buy a property thinking you're going to sell it and just take that money, unless you're going to take that money and invest it into the next property. The only time to sell an investment property is if you're buying up. You're getting something that's going to cash flow more, or you're getting something bigger that has maybe multiple units. Never ever invest in real estate and then be like, oh, look, I've got a ton of equity. I'm going to just take this and put it in my bank account. Now I've got lots of money. really, when you get into real estate, it's because you're in real estate and you know this is going to be your investment plan. And so a lot of people will buy, and we're going to talk about some strategies for how you do that, how you buy properties and hang on to them, and how you either turn them into rentals or you buy them as rentals. We're going to go over some of those options, but you really never want to sell unless you're going to use that money to get into your next investment property, because hanging on to those properties is what's going to make you a ton of money as we play that long game and we give it some time. Um,
Correct.
yeah, I think that covers everything there.
Yep, that's good with me.
Okay, let's talk about a little bit risk versus reward here. So lots of people get nervous when you talk about investing in real estate. A lot of people get nervous because there are a lot of naysayers out there, and they'll talk about the risks. They'll talk about, oh, I've heard so many stories of people like, I had renters who trashed the place, or I had this happen to the property, and it it totaled the home. We had to invest a ton of money, and you get lots of those stories of people talking about how they had a bad experience investing. And unfortunately, that is one of the risks you run, because there's no promise that if you buy, it's going to work out beautifully and you'll always have great renters and you'll always be cash flowing and your house will never need any repairs done to it. You run that risk. But on the flip side, the rewards that you get they outweigh the risks in almost every time. They outweigh the risks. So yes, there are these risks of maybe you may not make as much money as you're thinking, or you may have one of these horror stories with renters, or there's things that will happen. But like we said just a minute ago, you're running a business. When you're investing in real estate, it's almost like you're running a real estate business, and businesses sometimes have hiccups along the way, and you just have to understand that that's part of the process. And maybe you'll be one of the people who it works out and it's beautiful, and you buy the property you love, you get renters in and they want to stay there for 15 years because they love the home and they're great people. And there's a lot of positive stories like that too. And so when you're looking at, is it really worth it? Think of the best case scenario. What if it does work out? What if it's wonderful? And we're going to go over some numbers here as far as how to make sure, how to run those numbers to see, like, year over year, what the appreciation is on these homes and how you really are playing that long game. You're going to make so much money if you can
Correct.
just stick with it.
And if I can just add on to that, when I'm helping investors find properties, when I send them an Excel sheet with the numbers going over a property, we always are very upfront with people that of course there's risk. I'm sending you an estimate of what could happen. And some people, when in real estate investing, they're too positive on their numbers, thinking that there won't be any vacancy rates or that the market will be fantastic all the time. And so at least for me and my company, we try to be very realistic and maybe even lean more towards the negative side when you're looking at the numbers of a property, because then you really know what you're getting into. And just like I said before, even if something doesn't play out amazing in the moment, real estate investing is going to pay off in the long run. So
I love that. I love that. I wanted to talk about how we mitigate the risks. And Kelly, that's it right there. When we look at, well, let's look at like maybe like worst case scenario. Does it still make sense if we have some vacancies or if the market, takes a downturn? Let's talk about mitigating that. And this is where Kelly comes in. She'll help you a ton with this, because as we're looking at rental properties, you really want to find the right property to fit your specific situation. And location is going to be huge, right? If you can find a property in an area where we know we're going to have renters, like you're not going to have problems finding renters, that's going to ensure that you have less vacancies, right? But finding the right property in the right location. If we find something that is affordable for you, so it is an investment and you're putting a lot of money into these properties, but we don't want to push it to where, like, if you have a couple months of having no renters or something, a repair comes up, we don't want it to push it to where it's maxing you out. So we'll play with the numbers to make sure that the property we find for you does make sense, and it's not going to get you in a spot where you're, where you're stressing a little bit over the numbers. What else would you suggest, Kelly, to help kind of mitigate some of those risks?
When I really like that, because I myself have been at a couple different real estate companies, brokerages, and I really like the company I'm with right now because they're also partnered with property management. And that means that my clients are getting a window into data for rentals. So I help manage some properties for our companies, and I know exactly what areas in Utah County we get units filled quick, easy. And other areas, they sit vacant for a while. And so that's a very, very powerful tool to be able to help people find a property in an area that you're going to have low vacancy rates, because the low vacancy rates are a huge deal.
I love that. And I think that that's something to consider as you're looking at investing, because there's been times like my husband and I have talked about investing in real estate. We've got a couple little properties, but there's places where you're like, oh, if we were to buy out, out in the boonies, we'd save so much money on the purchase price, right? Like, oh, we could get a house for so cheap out. We looked at a house out in Vernal a while ago, and it was like, but if you buy a house out in somewhere more rural where yes, maybe it's more affordable, are you actually going to have renters? Like, and like, what does the job market look like out there? And like, is there a need for rentals out there? And so having someone like Kelly that has that data will make a huge difference. Cause I can't tell you how many times people have been like, well, yeah, if I buy a house, clear out here, it's like, yeah, maybe it's less expensive, but is that really a good investment, right? That location is going to play, it's going to play a big part of that. So we will help you with that. We'll help you take a look at some of those and help mitigate some of the risks and talk about your concerns. But on the flip side, we also want to help point out some of the rewards for you, and talk about what that looks like. Now, initially, I think it's kind of natural for people to just look at their cash flow each month. Like that's the first number people want to look at is, hey, my mortgage payment's going to be this much, my rent's going to be this much. How much am I making each month? And we take into consideration, if we're going to take some of that funds to put into a savings account, if we're helping pay for a property manager, right, to help run that. Which, if I could put in a plug there, property managers are so worth it. They are so worth it. So that's something we'll help calculate in, because you may say, well, I'm paying this much for mortgage, but if you've got property management fees on there, that we'll look at that as far as helping calculate the numbers. But it is so worth it because it takes so much stress off you as the property owner. But like I said, that's natural for people to look at just, here's my payment, here's my rent, this is what I'm going to make. And that's great. And we do want to help you cash flow each month, but we also want to take a look at what your appreciation is year over year on this property. How much return on your investment are you going to get that way? Homes typically appreciate, I would say, about 3.5% year over year. We're also going to take a look at depreciation that you can claim on your taxes, because owning an investment property can help a ton on your as a tax write-off. So we're going to look at that, and that's a return on your investment as well. And then we're also going to look at the principal pay down. So how much are you paying down by having someone rent this property from you each month, and year over year, how much is that principal depreciating? Because then you're getting more equity, and again, that's more money on your investment there. So there's lots of different things that we'll look at. And then we'll take all of that to say, okay, now this is really what the return on your investment is. Like, you're putting this much money into the home. This is why this property is worth it for you based off the numbers that we're using here. And we'll help you every step of the way with those calculations. So Kelly's job will be to help find the properties and we'll work hand in hand. So Kelly will work with you on helping you find those properties. I'll work on helping run those numbers, and then together we'll work on making sure that all of that lines up, and that this investment makes sense for you.
And I wanted to make a comment about that management, because you're completely correct. As a property manager, the amount of work that I do for our owners is crazy, but it is very interesting because you do want to find the balance. We did have someone recently come to us who had 2 rentals that they had, like 2 bedrooms.
Mhm.
And when we did the numbers for him, it probably would have been more beneficial for him to manage it on his own. But that being said, it's a lot to manage it on your own. And so sometimes people, when they're doing the numbers, they don't like having that management fee in there. But like Carly said, it's a lot of work. And so having a property manager really does pay off in your rental.
Oh yeah. I have a personal story I want to share there. So I have a family member that has a couple of rentals, and he's pretty handy, right? Like he's very, like, he can figure things out and he can do repairs, and he really enjoys that kind of stuff. So he was excited to be his own property manager because he thought that would be fun to have a couple extra houses now that he can do all these little projects on and do that kind of stuff. What he wasn't thinking about was the calls of like, hey, the AC just went out. We need you to come over like right now. And you're like, well, I'm working, or I'm out of town, or I'm, whatever. And you're not at a spot where you can run over and take care of what they need. And some renters are not handy at all, and they will ask their landlord to do everything for them. And so it is a lot. And this family member of mine, he still, at least right now, is still doing his own property management, but I can't tell you how many times that he has called other people to be like, hey, can you go help me with this? Because he's not at a spot where he can just like run over and take care of it, and his renters are waiting for him. And so I've, dropped hints like this is actually where like a property manager would come into play, instead of you calling other people and asking for favors and getting other people to help because you aren't at a spot where you can take care of it, like this is why we have a property manager, is so that you don't get in these situations, and then you don't have to worry about it, right? Your renter calls, and a lot of times, well, Kelly, do they call when you have a property manager? Do they even call the landlord, or do you just take care of it as the management company?
With our company, we have a 24/7 maintenance hotline. And so if someone gets locked out or if there's an emergency, there's a hotline number that they call and we have someone on clock who can go and help them. But you're correct. There are some property managers who are living in a duplex and renting out the other room, and so they self-manage. But that means that if anything happens with that tenant, you're 24/7 on the job. And so if you don't want that, then you need to consider management.
Love it. Yeah, yeah. We'll have time to answer questions on that if you guys have more specifics, or to know like what the fees would be. And I loved Kelly's honesty with, like, there may be some situations where if you've got smaller or maybe just one rental and it makes sense for you to just take care of it and not pay. But she'll be honest with you on that, right? Like, hey, this maybe doesn't make sense for the situation. But when you get more properties, or it starts to become unmanageable, that's where it really is key to get a property manager in there. I want to just go over a couple numbers really quick here, just to give you some examples. So I'm going to do a hypothetical scenario here as far as what we would look at on the loan side, on the number side, to see if the property makes sense. So I'm going to just run through it. Like I said, just a hypothetical scenario. So let's say that you could purchase a home for $400,000 and you have 25% down, which is pretty standard for an investment property. If you're buying a home solely just to rent it out, then that's kind of the industry standard, is about 25%. And then let's say your interest rate is at a 7%. Breaking that down between your principal, your interest, your taxes, and your insurance, your total monthly payment for your mortgage would be $2,260.91 for this specific property. Now, let's say that you could rent this out for $2,400 a month. So if you're looking just at, like, here's my mortgage payment, here's my rent, you're really only making about $140 a month. It's $139 and some change. So if you're looking at that and you're like, wow, $140 extra is really not that much when I'm putting $100,000 in. And yeah, that's only about a 1.6% return on your initial investment into this property. But the fact that you're cash flowing it all actually already is huge, especially in today's housing market. If you can even cash flow that much, you're already ahead of the game. But like I mentioned earlier, we're not only looking at that first amount that you're cash flowing, we also want to take into consideration what the home will appreciate year over year. And right now, kind of as a just typical, just like a number here that we're going to use a 3.5% year over year appreciation. Now, some years that's a lot higher. And so this number is actually fairly conservative. But let's say that we're in a slower market, so we're only seeing this 3.5% appreciation on a $400,000 home. That's $14,000 a year. So when you're looking at that initial $100,000 investment and you're appreciating $14,000 a year in equity, that's a 14% return on your investment in your appreciation. But we won't stop there. We also look at depreciation. Like I mentioned earlier, with your taxes, you can write off this investment property. And so you take this depreciation and it turns into a write-off. And you actually, well, you'll work with your tax guy, and I am not a tax professional. So these are just some rough numbers. If you want to get exact numbers, you'll want to work with whoever your CPA is or the tax guy that you're currently using. But let's say that you're taking the principal of the home, which it was a $400,000 home. You put $100,000 into it. So we've got a $300,000 principal here. And you can depreciate that over 27.5 years, which gives you 10,909. And then we take that and you times it by your tax bracket, and they'll look at your income. For this hypothetical scenario, we're going to say you're at a 22% tax bracket. So you'll take that 300,000 divided by that 27.5, and then we'll take that 10,909 and times it by 22%, which is your tax bracket. And you've got $2,400. And then that, looking at your initial $100,000 investment, is a 2.4% return on your investment. And then the last thing we look at is your principal pay down. So we said we've got that $400,000 purchase price. You've put in $100,000 into it. So you've got $300,000 that you own on this property. But each year you're paying down that principal. And so let's say that based off these numbers with how much your rent would be versus your mortgage payment, you're getting a 2.9% return because that's how much your principal is being paid down each year from somebody else's pocket, right? Somebody else is paying those rent payments. So we take all of that together, the cash flow, the appreciation, the depreciation, and that principal pay down, and really you have a 20% return on your investment, which if you're looking at, and I'm not well versed in stocks and bonds and all sorts of other ways that you can invest, but I'm pretty sure that 20% that's a higher value return there. And this is just a hypothetical situation, but we'll run these numbers for you for the property that you're thinking about purchasing. So we'll be able to take the purchase price plus what you're putting into it, and we'll do all of these same numbers so that you can see what your overall return would be on this investment property.
Correct. And then for anyone who is feeling like they're just like a beginner in investing, I think a really good way to look at it, because this is absolutely perfect, what you can see laid out here. If it ever feels complicated, the way that people have explained it to me is you just focus on 4 things, like it's showing here in this slide. When you're looking at something to decide if it's going to be a good investment opportunity, you look at the cash flow, you look at appreciation, depreciation, and principal pay down. And even if you don't understand all of these, Carly and I are here to help explain those. But that's what we're looking for to see if something is a good investment.
I love that. Now, one thing I want to point out here with this, I have some people who actually will make investments like in a 401k. And you know that you're not going to get a return on that investment for years down the road until you're ready to retire. And each month you're taking a little bit of your paycheck and you're putting it towards this 401k, and it's just sitting there and it's waiting for you to be ready for it. I've had some people take a look at what they're paying on these, what their cash flow is, and think of it almost as like their 401k payment. I have a friend who bought an investment property. It was about a year and a half ago now, and he actually was negative cash flowing. So his rent was about the same as his mortgage payment, just because the property he bought was a little more expensive, and that's just the way it worked out. And in his mind, that is still an amazing investment because he still has the appreciation, the depreciation, and the principal pay down. But he was like, well, if I stop putting money into my 401k and instead use that couple $100 and just like offset what I'm cash flowing here in this property, I'm still coming out ahead as an overall investment. So I'm not saying that we want to get in a situation where maybe you're losing money each month or even just breaking even, but it's definitely a mindset thing because sometimes you just got to jump in when you can jump in, and you are investing in this. And sometimes that takes a little bit of money up front. I love to hear people's stories of getting into investments. And it's funny how in hindsight, everyone wishes they would have bought sometime previous, right? Like you talk to people about investing and it's almost always like, I wish I would have bought, in 2009. I wish I would have bought. A lot of people are saying they wish they would have bought in 2019. But at the time, it felt like it was a high market. But then we had 2020 and 2021 where the market went crazy, and anyone who owned a home that bought in 2019 or earlier, their equity in their home just like skyrocketed. So I say this to you because what we don't realize is that usually the market we're in now is actually a good time to buy, but we don't see it till it's later. So people always will look back and be like, oh, I wish I would have bought, at this year or this time or in this market. But in that, in the middle of that market, you don't realize that that's a good time to buy. So if the numbers make sense and you're ready for it, any market like right now is a good time to buy, because you will never look back and go, oh, I wish I wouldn't have bought then, because by the time you look back, you will have gained all of these other, you will gain all these other, the money that, wow, what am I trying to say here? The appreciation, right?
Yeah, equity, yeah.
Yes, equity. Thank you. I had just like a brain freeze there. You will gain all that equity. So you're never going to look back and go, oh man, I wish I would have, or I didn't wish I would have, or wow, I wish I wouldn't have bought. No one ever says that when they're investing in real estate. Because if they don't like the property that they have, then they sell it and they buy a different property. And so like they're always upping their game here. So yeah, so it's always a good time to buy. Like I said, as long as those numbers make sense for you, then that's when you want to jump in.
Correct. And I also wanted to make a comment. I had sat down with our company's accountant the other day, because I have a list of people who are actively wanting to invest. And so I find properties, I run the numbers, and then I send them out if it looks like it could be a good opportunity to people. And so a lot of the times when we're looking at these properties in this market right now, the cash flow, it is very, very difficult. This is what our accountant advised, to find a property that has good cash flow, or it's very, very hard to find something in this market that is going to make a ton of cash flow. That used to be the market a while ago. It's not our market today. However, that being said, the properties are out there and the deals are out there, but you have to do the work for it. And so that's definitely where I come into play a lot, is I'm the one that's looking for properties and running the numbers on these all the time. So they're still out there. And then I also wanted to make a point for the principal pay down. Sometimes I get a lot of people that are just super, super worried about having an investment property or even buying their first home. And I think that principal pay down is huge, because as long as you're paying rent to somebody else, it's going into their bank account. And as soon as you start paying your mortgage, that is now building your equity. And that's huge. And so I think that the biggest thing to keep in mind when you get cold feet, when you're going into these kinds of things, is that you are building your equity long term and you're not putting your money into someone else's bank account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I amen to that. 100% agree with that. I love that. So we've talked a little bit about some of the rewards. I do want to touch on, oh, let's see. Sorry, it's actually a couple slides down when I was talking about strategies for acquiring properties and advice and tips. Let me go back. Do you want to talk about these other strategies that you have in here first?
Yeah, so the Cody Reader strategy, this is what I was mentioning before a little bit earlier in the presentation. He is a real estate investor and he's an asset manager, and he's been doing this for decades. And so it's very, very interesting, the two different strategies that both of these people practice. Cody Reader has a strategy of, you always buy a property every single year, no matter what the market looks like, because over time, time being the great equalizer of all things, it's going to turn out and you're going to have value added. And he's made a career out of doing that. And so it's definitely a strategy that you keep in mind, and that if you feel like you made a bad investment on something, you don't panic and you just hold on. And then the other strategy I wanted to bring up, Tanner Litchfield is someone who has been having a lot of success recently because our market has been so difficult with high rates. One of his strategies that he's been doing is finding sellers financing. So the way that he does it, if you were to look back on one of our slides where we talked about the numbers, if you were to put 25% down, and that's 100,000, that is a lot of money. Sellers financing can change the game. And so sellers financing means that instead of having the bank lending you the money, you're having the seller lending you the money, and you can change the interest rate, you can change all the terms that you want. And he's been very, very successful in helping people get investment properties through sellers financing. And so if that 25% down scares you, it's just good to know that there are other ways that you can approach the deals. And so both of those strategies are very different, but it's just something to keep in mind that people have done and they've had success with.
I love that. Yeah, the seller financing, actually, there's a lot of people that have built their real estate portfolio doing that type of financing, because you do have, you, in a lot of cases, you can have less of a down payment there. One of the other ways to acquire properties is actually to live in it first. So we've talked about when you're buying a property as an investment, right? You're not going to be living in it. You solely just want to make money off of it. Then it does change the lending guidelines a little bit. So you do have to have that 25% down is typically the standard. Your interest rate usually is a little bit higher because it's an investment property. We can take a look at the potential rents that you'll be making off the property to help you qualify to help pay for this, or help you qualify for the home. But a lot of people have built their real estate portfolio just by living in the homes for a little while, which this is huge. So if any of you listening to this are in a position where you're buying maybe your first home, this is huge for you, because I wish somebody would have explained this to me when I was buying my first home, because it will set your future up for so much success. So when you're buying your first home, or maybe it's not your first home, but maybe it's your second home, or just when you're buying a home that you know you're going to be living in, there are a couple of things you want to take into consideration. Either if it's just a one unit home, right, just a single family residence, the location, again, like we talked about, is this an area where when we move out, we'll be able to fill it with renters? Is it, what type of home is it? How big is the yard? There's some things that we'll take a look at. But on the lending side, your guidelines are different. So you've got a smaller down payment. In some cases, you've got zero down payment. And then your rate usually is better. Your mortgage insurance will work around that. But this is something that if you live in the home for up to a year, you can move out of the home without changing anything on your mortgage and just put renters in there. And then you use a new mortgage to go get your next property using the same primary residence lending guidelines. So the smaller down payment, the better interest rate. So you go move into your next property. And then you just keep doing that. And maybe every year, every few years, you move and keep all your previous homes as investments. And you never have to put 25% down or deal with a higher interest rate because you're living in them. And you can use this for single family homes. You can use this for condos. You can use this for duplexes. If you're going to live in one of the units, up anything up to a fourplex. So up to 4 units. If you're living in one of the units, it's a primary residence and you can get rent from the other things. Homes that have mother-in-law apartments, right? Or I've seen homes that have like apartments above the garage. All of that is extra income for you. And this is one of the easiest ways to become a real estate investor because it takes very little of your own funds up front. You just have to live in the property for a while. And this has helped a lot of people get set up for a lot of success because yeah, they played this game and you do have to be willing to move maybe a few times. But if you're young and you're in a spot where you're not uprooting your family, or maybe that works for you and your family, like this is a really easy way to get in the game without having a ton of capital up front.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, Carly, but I believe this is a strategy that people refer to as house hacking. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So some things I wanted to point out here, this is absolutely legit a strategy that people use because like we were saying, if you were to buy an investment property, you have a very large down payment. If you were to live in the property for a year and then go to the next house, I have a friend right now who is doing this. And so he bought his first house and now he's going to have renters there and he's going to buy his next house. He has a plan to get to 5 homes doing that. And he calculated it. And for him, he's going to be able to retire at the age of 35 after having these houses that he's going to buy. So it is absolutely completely a strategy that you can do that works. I would say one word of caution on house hacking that I've seen with some people. Some people try to lie and say that they are going to live in it, but then they don't. And that's where you can get into trouble. And we don't want anyone to be taking risks like that or facing consequences like that. And so I would just say, if you're going to do house hacking, 100% do it, but you do need to be honest about the way that you're doing it.
Yes. Yes. If you say you're going to live in the home and don't, that's actually considered mortgage fraud. And there's like huge fines, possible jail time. There's a lot of big consequences to that. So yeah, it's an easier way to get into real estate investing. Knowing what you're getting yourself into with the like, hey, I'm going to live in it for a little while and then I'm probably going to move again. And a lot of people will buy, I have a really good friend, her and her husband did this for their first few years of their marriage. And she would always complain because she was like, I always live in the crappy units because we'll buy like a duplex and we'll rent out one side and live in the one side and fix it up. And then when this one's fixed up to where we can get more rent out of it, we move into the crappy unit and then we fix that one up. And then when that one's fixed up where we can get rent out of it, we move into another place. And then we fix like that. That's kind of what the first few years of her marriage was like, was always living in kind of these older homes that needed a little bit of work because they were more affordable. And they'd live in it just long enough to get it really nice. And then they'd move out and the renters would love all the work they put into the house. And she's at a spot now where they're in their home that they'll probably be in the rest of their lives. And they've built that up. But yeah, for the first little while, they went through that where like every year it was like, hey, time to move again. And we're going to just do more house projects. But
Yep.
it's worth it in the end because now they have they've got a handful of real estate properties with, I haven't done the numbers, but just based off the area that her homes are in, they're probably close to maybe $2 million in real estate assets now, just because they had a place to live and they paid their mortgage, right? And then now somebody else is paying those mortgages. So we can answer any questions on that or go over your specific scenarios too, because that's a really awesome way to be able to get into this.
Yes. And just to even add on to that, I think the thing to keep in mind is that like those 2 strategies I was telling you about, Cody Reeder and Tanner Litchfield, same thing that Carly was saying. They were switching houses all the time and it was hard. But what you have to remember is I like this idea that people talk about of rich versus wealthy. Rich is making a lot of money. Wealth is how many days can I live forward without working? And so when you are doing this house hacking, when you're buying real estate investments, you are building up revenue for yourself so that if something were to happen or if you want to retire, you can live off of the rent that you're getting from your properties. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And so that's just something to keep in mind that yes, it might be a lot in the beginning, but it is a huge savings plan for yourself.
Yeah, you're building that wealth. Yeah. And you'll thank yourself later for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just have some few tips and tricks to share with you guys. We talked about having a property manager, and one of the things that makes this so amazing is that they will help find good tenants for you and help run, the credit checks or the background checks or that they just do their due diligence so they're not putting just anybody in your home, because we don't want someone that's going to come in and they're going to bring in problems or they're going to trash the property, or we want to try to stay away from those type of tenants if possible. And so when you're working with a good property manager, they'll help you find renters and help find good renters for you so that you don't have to worry as much about any liability on your end as the property owner. Something else that working with a good real estate agent will help you with is finding the right property and then knowing the rules with that property. Because what we see happen is someone will be like, this is really popular in the St. George area here in Utah. Lots of people want to own a rental in St. George because everyone vacations in St. George and you could probably make a lot of money. And like everyone wants to own a rental down there. But there actually are some city codes or even just some like HOA codes that restrict rentals. And if you don't have a good agent that knows to look for those things and can read all of the documents and will read the full title report and the CCNRs, and if you don't have an agent that really digs deep to those, you could potentially buy a property that now you cannot legally rent because of those rules and regulations and the codes for that city. So working with a good agent is going to help you a ton because they'll help you make sure that the property you're buying really can be an investment property. And yeah, they'll keep an eye out for that for you.
100%. I was even going to say, I was working with someone recently about having an investment property in St. George, and we had to look at a specific neighborhood, and they were like, oh yeah, we're going to do an Airbnb. We're going to make all this money. And we figured out that house was actually not even Airbnb viable. It was only long-term or midterm rental, which still worked, but it did change the name of the game. And so a big part of my job is making sure that it's zoned correctly and making sure that we could do an Airbnb or we could do long-term rental. So yes, 100% to what Carla is saying.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I love that. And the one thing on my end with the numbers is making sure that you have some reserves. So when you're looking at reserves is a term that we use that means you've got money in the bank just in case. You kind of have this little pocket of like, in case something happens, these are our reserves. If we've got a month or two where we don't have tenants, or maybe the house needs a new appliance or a little repair on it, making sure that you're taking any money that you're cash flowing from these properties and keeping them in an account as your reserves is going to take a lot of stress off of you. Because that way, let's say that you've got a phone call and they say, hey, the washer's broken. What do we do? You just either can pay a repairman or you can get a new one. And it's not that big of a deal because you've got this little bit of a nest ready for those types of situations. So when you're going into this, don't take every penny you make and just like, oh, this is my income and I'm going to go, I'm going to live off it or I'm going to spend it. Keep some of that as your reserves because it will come in handy as a property owner and as a landlord. It will take a lot of stress off you in the long run. And then my last piece of advice here is just to be careful. Well, we kind of talked about this with your property manager, but when you're renting to friends and family, it can seem really awesome. And this is specific situations for everyone, but it can seem really awesome to be like, hey, I'll buy this property. I have a cousin or a brother or even a parent that's going to rent it from me. But when you're the one investing into it, and you're putting you're kind of putting your heart and soul into the property and all of your finances. Sometimes people can get into sticky situations when renting with friends and family. And if you're using a property manager, this actually becomes less of an issue because you get to take a step back and say, okay, well, I'm the owner, but my property manager is going to handle like the routine check-ins, right? To make sure that the property is not being damaged or collecting rents, right? Those type of things so that you're not the bad guy in those situations if you're trying to help someone out. So if you're planning on renting to someone you have a relationship with, then I would definitely recommend using a property manager just in case. Because if you ever get in a situation where you have to like maybe evict someone because they're not paying rent anymore, you don't want to be the one to do that. So I'm just another plague, I guess, because you'll thank yourself later for that.
And honestly, this is something I see every day because I manage properties for people. Seeing the complications of, let's say something is broken, but the owner actually can't afford to fix it at that time. I am the middle person that gets to be like, oh, actually, we are not going to be able to fix it at this time. And I also have to keep the owner in check of, you have to abide by fair housing laws. And so if something needs to be fixed and it's not being fixed, there's sometimes when I have to say, we don't fix this, we're against the law. So yeah, it's good to have a property manager who knows the fair housing laws and who knows the laws of the community, because especially right now with Utah County going through oh boy, occupancy limits. That's
Oh, yeah.
right now, a lot of owners have tried to, and not in a malicious way, but they have tried to push the occupancy limit to make more money. But you're gonna get fined and you're gonna get attacked by the city if you don't abide by the codes. And most normal people just don't know those laws and codes. And so, yeah, having a real estate agent and a property manager who is aware of all of that is gonna protect you from those fines.
I love that. Yeah, so that's kind of, I mean, it's a lot of information, but really like everything you need to know kind of upfront about real estate investing. If you're thinking about making this work for you, these are some things to keep in mind. We are available for questions. We'll put our contact information. Actually, it should be here across the screen. So if you want to reach out to us, we'll have our contact information here. And yeah, we're happy to help with anything we can do.
Thank you guys so much.